Hi, everybody. It's John Chrastka with EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. We're here for a big conversation today with Tim Coates, the principal investigator for the Freckle Project, coming to us live from the UK. Hello, Tim. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, John.
Good. It's a pleasure to be back with you today in this conversation. We've been working on the Freckle Project. You started it several years ago in order to understand both the bookseller and the library world a little bit more deeply. And then you fell down a rabbit hole, Tim, I think, like I did with libraries and wanting to see if we can to improve, enhance, extend library services. So this is the ninth Freckle Project survey. And Tim, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the project, though? I know it because we've been thick as thieves about it from time to time.
So, yes, thank you, John. I want to say two things before I answer your question,
Okay.
but like politician. First is to congratulate you on all the work that you do and your institute do, that we see over here. It's remarkable, and it deserves every absolute kind of wholesome credit to you, really.
Oh,
And
thank
that comes from me most sincerely. And then the second is also to say thank you for what you've just been talking about, is that since the very beginning of trying to work out what we were doing, you have been the best supporter. You've been the person who sat there and said, "What are you trying to say here?" And kindly, and it's worth listening to, which makes a huge difference to everything. So I did want to say both those two things before we start, and it's sincere. And then to go back to your question, which is quite right, is why did it all start? And it started because I had been working with some uh, library management system suppliers in the United States, and in conversation after conversation, we were talking about what the system should be doing and all that. And I was always listening out to see, well, what are the libraries trying to do? That's what the system should be trying to help with. And I could never, and don't still get a clear answers to what is the library service for, and what is it clearly trying to aim for? Because and I know in kind of working life, an organization where everybody knows exactly what you're trying to do works an awful lot better than one where nobody really can say anything and say, well, we do everything really. So that was where it all started. And I then realized that there are very few figures which describe how the library service is operating. And I wanted to see if I could help with that. In my old job as you said, in working in groups of retail stores, there's a base of information that you have to have, both internal and external. It's how you're getting on and how you think your your audience regards you. You have to have both of those. And there are some figures in the library service, although kind of not complete, about how the library service is doing. But at that point, there were no figures at all about really comprehensive figures about what the audience might be thinking about it, or how
you.
much they use it. And that was where it started. And that's the origin of these surveys.
That's fantastic. So while I put up the 2025 May, I'm sorry, April was when we worked on the data collection, and May
Yeah.
of 2025 is when you're publishing the results. The thing that intrigued me most, Tim, at the beginning of this whole process, as we started our conversations, was the fact that you were asking a question that I don't think had been asked properly before, which is, where did you get that book? Where did you get that book is so active of a question. And the findings here, both pre-pandemic, with the first round in, I believe, April of 2019 here in the States, and now May or April of 2025, I'd love for you to step us through your findings on the most recent survey. That answer to that question matters a great deal, both to the library community and to the booksellers. It matters a great deal to the publishing community and to authors themselves, because in the end, and you as an author of more than 30 books knows this, you want to connect with your readers somehow, somewhere.
Very good. I think just for clarification, everything here is about America. I'm speaking with an English accent. I know I am, but all these surveys are wholly and entirely about about people in America. I think it's important to say that.
Yeah. So please take us through here, Tim, and tell me next slide, and I'll keep moving.
So this is just a bit of detail. As you say, we've done a number of surveys now. Honestly, none of them is big enough. You would wish that we could ask 10,000 people, but we have a limited resource for doing this, and every time we're at around 800 respondents, and that's accumulated into almost 6,000 or 7,000 people now. So we have begun to build a fairly consistent picture. We get very similar or very understandable answers each time now. So I think that the surveys are credible. And that's what that slide is trying to say. So next is, and there are a whole set of questions, but this is just a few of them, just to explain to the people watching what we do. It's an omnibus survey, goes out to all over America, and the first thing we ask actually is, did you read a book, or actually did you make use of a book? Because I'm very conscious that if you say, did you read a book, there's a kind of school type of implication in that about, and people think you might be talking about a novel, mm-hmm. and we're not, because we could be talking about looking at a cookery book or listening to an audio tape or looking at a roadmap or anything. It's the whole breadth of the publishing industry, truly. And then after we've asked that and some other questions, then we say, just think about the book that you're looking at now or have been most recently. Where did you get it? In what format is it? Print or ebook or audio? And now we ask what was the book, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And then we ask, why did you choose it? So what was it that made you choose it? And it's the answers to those kinds of questions is what we're going to show you today. And as you've said, there are findings from all these things, and just the ones from this year, the one last month in April, we asked, one of the questions is, if you're a library user, what do you use the library for? And we'll show you the slide of the answers, but this is a headline every single time we do it that people, I think, don't realize is how much of physical library visits actually are about reading or borrowing or just sitting reading or studying books. Books are so important to the whole of the library visit that it needs saying, and it doesn't change.
Tim, it's very interesting. This insight from 2019 through today has really guided us here at EveryLibrary to talk not only about the flashy and interesting and noble things that might be utilized by people in moments of need or moments of transition or moments of crisis even, to remember to talk about the culture of reading. And the culture of reading that's supported, if 76% of library visits are for books and reading, that intersection point with the reader is not for a program about how to use Excel spreadsheets. It's very much about that culture of being a reader.
Exactly. And it is so important. And when we ask what is the library for, you've got to say it's about reading. I mean, if you don't say that, and a lot of answers that we get, I mean, you know this because you watch all the same things I watch. A lot of people won't say that. They'll say all kinds of things, but they don't say that. Anyhow, progressing, because we'll come to that in more detail. The one big change that we have noticed since the pandemic really was that 10 years ago, only 8% of library circulations were digital. This last survey that we've had, it's 45%.
Yep.
We'll talk about that compared to the sort of national picture, but that is probably the one big change that we've seen. We thought after COVID it might start going back down again, which is what I've been looking out for the last two surveys that we've done. In fact, it's gone up. So there's no doubt at all that a huge amount of reading, and libraries are very involved in it, is now digital. Mm-hmm. And it does seem now that the COVID bounce, as it was called, basically has finished. We're now out of the, we all understand what that means, is that everything went down during COVID, and then it's come back up again, and it seems to have sort of it's got to its sort of back to normal now. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I'm going to talk about in this survey, probably more than anything, is that we've been looking at what's in the library collections, what people get, what people read widely and in the whole population, and what they get from libraries, in order to see whether the library collections are being really representative of what people want to read. And the conclusion, as it says there, is libraries have too little nonfiction and too little backlist, and it's very, very noticeable. And it is a way, and I'm going to talk about this, it is a way that actually we can increase use, because it means that we're missing some big audiences of people who read and would love to use the library, but then when they come into it, the library, then they're not finding what they're looking for. Thanks.
Sure.
Next. So this is the first question. Do you read or whatever? There it is. You can see that green line started out at 81%, and this most surveys given it 82%. In other words, it's not true to say that people don't read. It just simply isn't true, and it never has been. In all the years I've been working, but there is a kind of attitude that you get in, I don't know, from businessmen or whoever, say, "Oh, people don't read anymore." It's not true, and there's the evidence for it, and that stacks up with what Pew find. You'll see in a second the figures are very in line with what Pew and other surveys find. Next. The kind of fundamental answer to the question that we've asked is, where do people get their books? Is most of it comes from commercial retail, whether that be Amazon or or your local bookstore or chain bookstore or whatever. But then there's a huge amount of books that come just simply because they're in your house or in somebody else's house and they're giving it to you. Or there's a lot of sort of passing around, which is a very important part of the marketing of books, actually, to be a bit technical, but we'll see a bit more about that. And then the libraries and schools is around, every time we do the survey, is around 16 to 20%. It goes up and down by that amount. But it means that libraries, basically, public libraries, do play a very significant part in helping people to find. And of course, it is of a different kind to the obtaining books from commercial retail. And that's why they are so important. 16% is a big and important number.
Absolutely, and we've seen it as high as 22%. That COVID bounce that you were talking about before. But what we saw that I thought was the most fascinating during COVID, and the fact that we were doing contemporaneous data collection every 6 months during COVID. The major change was on people getting books from friends. And it was part of that human interaction that was limited during COVID. If I couldn't come over to your home for your birthday, Tim, I couldn't give you my favorite book for you to read.
Yeah. And the other element of that too is that the more reading has become digital, the less of it has become, a gift from your friend. You can give someone a book, a printed book, but you can't really give them an ebook. I know you can, but it's not quite the same thing to something to open on Christmas Day kind of thing. And that's made a difference. Anyhow, so lying behind whatever we do in the survey is these figures, which basically come from the IMLS, but with some sort of additions at the end now. But the underlying pattern is that library visits have fallen by half. You can't put it more bluntly than that, more simply than that. That's a really serious decline. That's really what is why we're doing this work. It's not to point that out, which people get irritated. It's to try and to say. I mean, I think we do know to some extent how are we going to get out of that declining path, and you can see how COVID had an effect on it. Fine, and we sort of come out of that, but the decline is still there. It isn't of its own volition getting any better.
Well, and I appreciate the overlay here, if I may editorialize. You have IMLS, which of course focuses the Institute of Museum and Library Services, ULC, which is the Urban Libraries Council, and then Tim's survey that we support here at EveryLibrary, the Freckle Project, and the fact that these overlays are so close to each other, Tim. Should be edifying, first off, to your data collection rigor and methodology, but also I think it's a real validator of this, both retrospectively and moving forward. So kudos on the data work, but this is one to pay attention to, folks, because it has real veracity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it does. So this is the point we were making earlier, and this I can't remember where we've left this. There's also a slide from 2019, which basically is exactly the same. And for all the effort and investment that has been put into all the different services that libraries offer, including open access internet terminals, including makerspaces, including programs even. The dominant, absolutely, totally dominant reason why people use public libraries is are actually the same reasons as they would have used 30 years ago, if you could put it simply, is to go to read or to work or privately, or in those days to read the newspapers or whatever. But it is about reading, and that is a very stark presentation of it there. But that's how it always comes out. Next.
Yeah, and this is 2019.
Oh, this is 2019. Well, exactly. So this is 6 years ago, and it just shows that it's almost exactly the same slide. It is. I went back through the spreadsheets to get that, and there it is. It hasn't changed at all. And when we first did it, that did startle people because they didn't believe it was true. But 6 years of saying the same thing, we believe them now. The people.
Well, it's either that or the stuck clock is right twice a day. We'll see.
Yeah, but it has said, it has said the same thing every single time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right, I love this slide, Tim, and it's interesting to me. The ratios of have been pretty consistent as well, except during the depths of the pandemic. Yeah,
we have occasionally had book clubs coming up higher than they are, but basically it's the same slide again that we've seen all the way through. And for a librarian, what it's telling you is that if you want to help people find what they want to read, what matters is that first that you have it in stock. That's the overriding factor. Not that it's away somewhere that it's going to take 2 months to get it, or it's in another library 10 miles away, or you can't have. The thing you have to have is you have to have it there in front of them when they look for it, and then it has to be clearly labeled with the author's name if it's fiction, or the subject's name if it's non-fiction. And then all these other things come into play. But the two things on the left of that slide, author and subject, are the two things that drive how you lay out, how you signpost, how you indicate things in the library. And then all these other things, kind of people talk a lot about social media, for example. But actually, it's a very small influence on persuading people to read something.
The fact that it's librarian and bookseller as hand sales or personal recommendations, the fact of the matter is it's the curation, as you've said before, of both the space and the curation of the online experience that is done by those professional librarians and those professional booksellers. But the actual moments of human interaction might be smaller than either a bookseller or even a librarian would wish for. But that doesn't obviate the fact that what we have here is an algorithm of decision making that's consistent amongst Americans throughout this whole survey period.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So 49% of Americans use the library website, though. You've mentioned the shift, of course, from print to digital, the discovery that happens when you go into the building versus on your phone or on the website.
Yeah. So it's important to ask, what do people use the website for? And kind of, if you were kind of not thinking about it, you'd say, well, of course, that's where they get the ebooks and the download the audio. But the truth is that the column on the left, the most use of the website is for the reservations and looking up print books. So print books are the website has played an enormously important part in helping people to find print books, just as much as it has ebooks and audio, and then you see the other sort of things that you would use anybody would use a website for, like opening hours.
I'm going to suggest that several of our watchers and listeners today know several long multi-digit numbers, including telephone numbers, perhaps the telephone number from your childhood home, your government ID number, your driver's license, your social security number, and I bet a whole bunch of people who are watching this know their library card number too, because they have to input all 10 to 12 digits on that website, and they know it by heart with their thumbs.
Good for them.
All right, so use of all library services in 2025. You have a hybrid here of Freckle, which is the survey work that we've been doing since 2019, and the IMLS. Take us through what this looks like.
So the sort of general thesis I'm trying to make here is that whereas 30 years ago, libraries were essentially about books and reading, which is what we've said, they've now become about three things. And I know that I've put them together, and it's more complicated than that. But these are the three what I kind of identified to help the discussion. The blue box is the print books and reading. The red box is all things digital, and the green boxes are all these various different community services which aren't particularly about books, the meetings and the programs and all the rest of it. And what I'm trying to say by implication is that, well, first you can see how print books are dominant. They really are the most important thing for bringing people into the library. But if you put them with the digital material, which is basically books as well, those two represent sort of 90% of the reasons for using libraries, and it's actually 88. It leaves 12%, which are the community services and programs. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of kind of like management, effort, resource, belief that you can do better, the two where you're going to make a difference, and certainly the one that you're going to make a difference, is whether you can get people to use the books more. You're not going to make a huge, even if you double the number of people going to programs, it's only going to add about 3% to the use of the library. And I think it's that management emphasis which is so important. And I never hear, I'm sure that I'm being unkind by saying that, but I never hear people say, I've got to get another 10% people in, to read the books. But by doing that, it will make a huge difference to the popularity of the libraries.
Right.
That's the point of that slide, really.
And I do want to editorialize this for just a moment, because the management emphasis does not mean negating a whole area of service, though. It is the fact that if we pay more attention to our core, not to the exclusion, not to a zero-sum situation, but if we pay more attention to our core, we'll be more successful overall. And that there's a certain number of people who avail themselves of different aspects of the provision of service from public libraries. And those folks who are coming in for that core service need the proper attention, as well as folks who are coming in for particular kinds of programs or community services, et cetera. I think that the times when folks in the library industry wrinkle their nose at this is the idea that you have to blow out one candle to make the other one shine brighter,
Sure. I mean, there must be 100 different ways of saying this, but it's about balance, really, isn't it? And it's a responsibility of management to make sure the balance is right.
I'm with you on that, Tim. All right. So this slide is complicated. It bears scrutiny, and I want to remind people that it's available on the EveryLibrary Institute site, everylibraryinstitute.org. The Freckle reports going back to 2019, the surveys, plus the narrative for the 2025, the April-May 2025 report is available through our site. So, Tim, what are we looking at here? It's Freckle report information, Pew, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, your analysis overlaid on here.
Yeah. What it's showing is the extent to which digital services have come about and the time in which they came about. In 2012, there were very few people borrowing or circulating ebooks or audio. they were, as the figure says at the bottom. By 2019, just before COVID, even though in the general population there were a lot more people using digital stuff, it hadn't really taken off in the library world, despite a huge amount of investment, which we'll see in a second. It hadn't really taken off. But during COVID, it really did take off. So the yellow and the red represent that dramatic increase in the proportion of circulations which are digital. And it also shows, the blue box shows the dramatic fall in percentage of circulation of print books which has come about. And it's not hard to understand, but it's terribly important that you don't need to go into the library to borrow digital material. You can do it from home, you know that. So that fall in the blue box exactly mirrors the fall in library print circulations, and it completely matches the fall in library visits. In other words, we can see the reason why the visits have fallen in that slide, and it is because of the disproportionate, or not disproportionate, because the dominance of digital material has come without a corresponding balance in the print material.
Also, I would like to note that was it the x-axis that goes up? Yes, it is. Right. The fall is one whole basis point overall, though, and that between 2012, where we were near an 8 loans per citizen, we're down below 7.
Yeah.
Overall, so that is of note.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, the rise in digital never made up for the extent of the fall in print. That's the way to say that. But when we look at, and this is it just in percentage terms, it's the same set of figures. So it just shows the extent to which the digital has sort of encroached isn't the right word, because what should have happened was that the print should have stayed high as well, so that we were doing both at the same time and holding up the library visits. But that's what we haven't done, really.
Certainly. All right, let me find my cursor. Here we go. So then we're talking about investments. This is tax dollars, folks.
This is tax dollars from IMLS report every year that they do, showing how much has been spent on print material and how much has been spent on electronic material. So you can see the fall in investment in print material, and you can see the rise in investment in electronic material, which is, to the point that they're almost equal. Now, this completely different subject.
Yes.
Completely different. Stop and start again.
Okay.
So during the survey, what we do is we ask people, what is it that you've been reading? And of course, they could give a very complicated answer, but hardly anybody could. But they say enough for you to be able to work out what it is that they're talking about. So they could say, the latest, I don't know, John le Carré or something. But from what they say, we can tell certainly whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and certainly the other dimension that I look at, which you'll see in a second, is kind of when was it first published? Is it a brand new title or not? So in the general population, not libraries at all, but in the general population, people read non-fiction slightly more than they read fiction. That's very important to know.
There's always the personal moment of reflection that's attached to something like this. But in the aggregate, a large enough population and a large enough sample, it sorts out. All right, so this I thought was fascinating as well. And this is original survey work, folks, that Tim has been doing. There's a tremendous amount of data collection underneath the Freckle survey, and a lot of natural language questions that Tim has spent a lot of time unpacking, particularly the titles of books. What's the most recent book? Where did you get that book is a great question. But then his next question was, well, what was it? And what we've learned in this Freckle survey from April 2025 is fascinating to me about that insight into backlist.
Yes. So if you'd never seen that slide, if we'd never had this conversation, you'd say to most people, what do people read? And they say, well, it's all in the top. It's in the top 20. It's in the New York Times bestseller list. So that's what most reading is. Truth is, and that's never been true. The top 20, the top 50 is a tiny percentage of the breadth of reading that people do. And when you see people in a bookstore or in a library coming up to the desk, bringing up their books, you realize that a very small portion of what they bring is stuff that's been published in the last year, in the last 6 months. It's normally about 15%. So that 32% represents 3.5 years, most recent. In fact, if you just look what normal people will call a front list, which is about the last year, it's about 15%. If you understand what I mean, is most books that people read are not the things that have been published, and they're certainly not the things that publishers keep talking about. So what you read in the newspapers about this bestseller, the New York Times bestseller, that is not what people are reading. And I think, well, there are certainly surveys of what people buy. We know that the publishing industry is full of them, and there are surveys about what libraries circulate. But what there isn't anywhere is a survey of what people actually read, and that's what we've been trying to establish. And so this by reading by date is a very important measure of, and you see that before 1900, books written before 1900 represent 8% of what people look for. 20th century, all those books in 20th century, 20%. They are very large numbers of people still reading the great books of the past, of course, and it's a terribly important factor in building a collection in a library that's going to be helpful to people.
This is just a fascinating insight to me. And then format. We've spoken about this a bit already.
Yeah, so this is just a repeat of the thing that I'm trying to now build a picture. Okay, so what should we be offering to the public? It needs to reflect in totality what's the best chance of them finding what they're going to like. So we know that in total we ought to have 56 books present in print, 24. 21, we may be getting close to that, but in the next slide you begin to see where we're not getting it.
So if I can remind everyone that the overall reading, where did you get that book? What was the book? It's about 50-50. But this is particularly through libraries as the access point.
That's right. So from libraries, because the survey is saying, where did you get this book that you're talking about? And they said, well, I got it from the library. So what we find is that if the people who got the books from the library are getting much more fiction than they are getting non-fiction, which to me suggests, well, it's telling it's for sure the library hasn't got enough non-fiction. Plain simple. It's as straightforward as that. Or they couldn't find it, but it's not satisfying the need for non-fiction. And if you were to match those two blocks and raise the non-fiction to the level of fiction, you would have increased the non-fiction by a half, and that's a huge amount of missed opportunity to help someone find what they want to read. That's where the missed opportunity is. That's the bit where we could build back the audience. In this case, obviously, by having a much stronger representation of non-fiction.
I do think it's interesting because when you look at the genres, literary fiction, mystery, romance, then you move very quickly into history, cooking, the reference materials, the human nature of this to find where you can what you want, and it is very interesting that the ratios of access points in libraries are so different than the general population of reader.
Yeah, there's a presumption that it's all on YouTube, isn't it? Kind of thing. Anything sort of factual, it's all on YouTube or Wikipedia. Well, actually, no, it's not. And people, kind of have found, well, YouTube, for certain things, of course, it's terribly good. Wikipedia for certain things is terribly good. But if you really want to understand something in depth and read a book about it, people still do. And this is from April. It's not sort of something from 10 years ago.
This is just from the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's terribly important. Anyhow, so again, just coming back to this, what is the date of the book? And so what was coming from libraries is a much greater proportion of it is brand new fiction than you would have expected to find. That's the point of that slide, really. The very little of the distant backlist and a much smaller proportion of the sort of 20th century backlist. There should be more. There should be more classics, if you like, or more of the great books of the past in a public library.
So again, there's this conversation happening in libraries in regard to the Freckle Project over the years, and are we leaning into what we're good at versus are we not paying proper attention to what we have been good at in the past and could still be good at? I think about this, Tim, with the idea that there are over 17,000 public library service points in the United States. There's 9,850 or so main libraries, but you add on all the branches. There's so much. There's so many places for people to access public libraries. There's so many school libraries and university libraries out there as well. That I think your thesis on this is more accurate, perhaps even than I like to admit to all the time, because 17,000 locations to access materials means that it should be a general readership. It should be the norm. We should be going to the mean on this, and we're not.
Yeah. But it shows the opportunity. Kind of at management school, they would tell you.
Sure.
Next, yeah, okay. So this is comparing those two slides really. On the graph on the left is from a library, the books read by date of publication from a library, and on the right is the books by date of publication read in the general population. That's the scale of difference between the two. That's the point I'm trying to raise and would like to address. It is, of course, it's, as you say, there are 17,000 libraries, and every single one of them will be different, and they're all in different communities, which is kind of which is the great strength of them. And so any one of those could say, "Oh, it doesn't apply to us," but there's a method. You can go through what you're lending, what you're circulating, and what your local community is like, and actually you can build up a picture of where you're missing the opportunity. And I've been able to do it in 3 or 4 libraries in the last year, and every time it's a bit like an illness, really. It's a common illness, but the manifestation of it is different in each different place. And of course, the kind of how do you handle it is different in each different place. But the illness, and it is an illness of misguiding or misselecting. It's the collection management process which isn't working. I think that's what I'm driving myself towards. It really isn't working, and it hasn't worked, I don't think, for all the time that we've had digital content. We've not had a proper understanding of the collection management process.
All right, so take us home here, Tim, with the summaries. And folks, I want to remind you, if you're watching this, that the Freckle Report 2025 April data collection, May publication is available from the EveryLibrary Institute.org, our 501c3 nonprofit public policy, tax policy, and education policy think tank. Tim, there's a big think in here. Take us home.
Okay, so this is the last slide, and I won't read out all these. I'll just kind of read the last two, actually. I mean, basically, it's just going through what we've just been talking about. So the last 2 points say, the evidence here, moreover, shows that book collections in libraries are strongly lacking in nonfiction and backlist pre-2023 titles. Too much of the service is about free new novels, which is not the reputation that public libraries should be seeking for their enduring legacy. That is where we need a new approach is needed. That's my and I should add, I do think a lot of it is about the traditional methods of collection management which really we need to act to quickly, not some great academic exercise, but quickly point to some key points that are not working at the present time.
Tim, I appreciate your insights here. I'm gonna hit stop share, put us both up here on the screen. There's a couple components to this that challenge us as an organization. Again, that focus that we've been trying to take the last year and a half on culture of reading, the fact that there's a connection chain between author and publisher and either library and bookseller and reader. Coming back around to that in our conversations, our everyday conversations, I think it's been very important for us as an organization that's doing issue advocacy. We haven't stopped talking about the special things, the unusual things, the focused activities of libraries on particular populations, but reminding ourselves here at EveryLibrary, reminding ourselves that it's really at the heart of reading has broadened our conversations with the American public again. Folks who identify the library as being important to themselves because they want to get their good stuff from the library. They want the good stuff. They want to read the good stuff. And those noble things that librarians do for populations that need it. I think we've become a better organization as advocates for our sector. And I hope that folks can give this a listen as well to be better service points for their population. I know that, Tim, that you're interested in working with individual libraries, with library management teams. You mentioned a few moments ago about working with 3 different libraries right now. How can folks avail themselves of your insights?
Thank you. Yes, I would love to help anybody who's interested. And you have my email address. It's widely available. No, that's not the issue. And somebody asked me yesterday, what am I looking for? Which is a fair question. And basically, I will say, please be cooperative. Please give all the information that we're going to need to do this properly. Don't be reluctant, but what I would like to do is to work in just 1, maybe 2 of your branches, not the biggest place, and then shelf by shelf, we'll try and build the collections, and you will see very quickly what a difference that makes to people in that little local community when they start to begin to find the books that they're looking for, really. And I would love to help, and we can make it as sort of shallower and deeper an investigation as we like.
Very good. All right, folks. Tim Coates, Freckle Project. Please visit everylibraryinstitute.org to get the slides, to purchase your copy of the 2025 report, and to look at prior year reports as well. Tim, we'll be back again with each other on this conversation in the fall, in the autumn, but I'm looking forward to seeing how this continues to evolve every April when it comes to data collection. So thank you for taking the time with me and our audience today, and I do hope folks take advantage of this. It's some very powerful insights and very actionable. So thanks, Tim.
Thank you, John.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.